The outer colonies of humanity were quiet places. People there lived simple lives among wide fields, blue skies, and the soft hum of machines that kept their settlements running. Children played near rivers, traders moved between small towns, and many believed the galaxy had finally given them peace. For decades, the outer colonies had been free from the wars that once shook human history. Life was calm, almost too calm, and that calm was about to break. When the first alien ships appeared above the colony of Arlen, few understood what was happening. The sky grew dark as enormous shadows moved across the clouds. At first, settlers thought it was a mistake. Some believed it was only a fleet of cargo vessels or perhaps an exploration convoy passing by. But when the ships opened fire, burning farms and homes in seconds, the truth was clear. The colonies had been attacked. Panic swept through the towns. Families rushed into underground shelters. Alarms rang across every district. Old transport ships tried to lift off the ground, hoping to carry civilians away, but alien fighters struck them down before they could reach the sky. The attackers were swift and merciless. Their goal was not just to win control but to erase any sign of human life on the colonies. The aliens were known as the Zoroth, a proud empire that had ruled its corner of the galaxy for centuries. They had crushed smaller races with ease and grown arrogant in their victories. To them, the human colonies were simply another resource to claim. They saw humans as weak farmers and miners who had no real defense. They expected no real fight, and at first, it looked like they were correct. On Arlen, the governor sent desperate messages to every other colony and to the central human worlds far away. His voice shook as he spoke, but he did not give up. We are under attack. Our defenses are falling. If anyone can hear this, send help. Do not let the colonies die in silence. His signal spread across the stars, carried by ancient communication relays. The governor did not know if anyone would answer, but he sent the message again and again until the control tower was destroyed. The Zoroth watched with cold satisfaction as fire consumed the human settlements. They landed troops to secure the remaining towns, marking their victory with banners of their empire. To them, the war was already finished. In their arrogance, they believed humanity would bend its head and accept chains. They did not know the truth. Across the colonies, survivors gathered in hidden shelters and deep caves. They whispered to each other about legends from old wars, stories that had been told by grandparents but never taken seriously. The stories spoke of warriors unlike any others, humans who had earned a name feared across the stars' dragons. Many thought these were only tales, a way to give courage to children during the hard years of rebuilding after ancient wars. But as the invaders marched through their homes, people began to wonder if those legends were real. Far away, on quiet planets where veterans had long lived in silence, the message from Arlen reached them. Old hands, once steady on weapons, now shook as they listened. They remembered battles where the skies were filled with fire, battles where humanity had nearly been destroyed but had clawed its way back with unbreakable will. These veterans had been given a name by their enemies, a name they carried with pride and pain: dragons. One such veteran, an old soldier named Darren, sat in a lonely outpost watching the stars. He had promised never to fight again. His armor was locked away, his weapons covered in dust. But when the message repeated through his station, he closed his eyes and remembered. The screams of the past returned, the smell of burning worlds, the faces of comrades who never came home. He knew what the message meant. Humanity was being tested again, and this time, the colonies were paying the price. The Zoroth thought they had silenced humanity with fire. They believed the outer colonies would fall quietly and be forgotten. but they had made a mistake greater than any they had made before. By striking the colonies, they had awakened something they did not understand. The dragons had slept for too long, but now their eyes began to open. The sky above Arlen burned with smoke, but deep beneath the ruins, survivors still lived. Children huddled close to their parents. Farmers held simple tools as weapons. And somewhere, far beyond the edge of known space, old warships began to power up. Engines that had not been heard for decades roared back to life. Silent hangars opened, and light filled the dark halls once again. The broken silence of the colonies was not the end of humanity. It was the beginning of a storm that would sweep across the galaxy. The Zoroth did not know it yet, but their victory was an illusion. By attacking human colonies, they had not ended a people. They had awakened the dragons. The message from Arlen traveled far across the black sea of space. It crossed relay towers, bounced between satellites, and reached distant human worlds that had almost forgotten the colonies. Some dismissed the cry for help, thinking it was only another false alarm. But others listened, and among them were those who could never ignore such words. On a quiet planet called Riston, the transmission echoed inside an old bunker. The place was filled with dust, metal walls covered in rust, and machines that had not been touched for years. Yet when the governor's voice reached that bunker, an old man named Darren stood still and listened. His heart was heavy, his breath deep and slow. He had hoped never to hear such a call again. Darren was not alone. Across many worlds, other veterans heard the same desperate signal. They were scattered, some living as farmers, some as traders, and some in hidden stations no one remembered. They had walked away from war long ago, but the cry of Arlen cut through their silence like a blade. They could not forget what they once were. They were dragons. The dragons had been born in a different age, when humanity had fought for its very survival against countless enemies. They were not called dragons by choice. That name had been given to them by their foes, who saw them as creatures of fire and destruction. Humans had never forgotten that title, though in time it became more legend than truth. Children grew up hearing bedtime stories of the dragons, stories of impossible battles and victories that should not have been possible. Many thought those stories were myths. But for the veterans who carried the scars, they were memories. As the message spread, whispers grew in every corner of human space. Colonies that still stood began to wonder. Would the dragons return? Would they rise from their shadows to defend humanity once more? No one knew for sure, but hope began to stir. On Riston, Darren walked into a locked chamber deep inside the bunker. The door hissed open slowly, releasing a rush of cold air. Inside the chamber stood an old war suit, dark and heavy, marked with the symbol of a burning wing. It had been built for battles no ordinary human could survive. He touched the armor with his hand, feeling the cold metal against his skin. His reflection stared back at him from the visor, showing a man much older, but still with fire in his eyes. Far across the stars, on a mining world named Tehran, another veteran named Myra sat in a workshop. She had once been a pilot, one of the fastest among the dragons. She lived quietly now, fixing machines for miners and avoiding the past. But when the transmission reached her, she froze. She turned off the machine in her hands and looked to the sky through a cracked window. She knew what she must do. She went to the underground bay where her old fighter ship rested. Its wings were covered with dust, but its frame was strong. She ran her hand across it, whispering softly, "We fly again." The same scene played out on many forgotten worlds. Veterans who had promised never to fight again began to gather their strength. Ships that had slept for decades were uncovered. Weapons hidden beneath layers of dust were cleaned and repaired. The dragons had not spoken to each other for years, but now, without words, they answered the same call. Meanwhile, the Zoroth Empire celebrated. They had conquered Arlen and 2 other colonies without losing a single major ship. Their commanders sent messages back to their High Council, boasting of easy victories. They believed humanity would break quickly, surrendering every colony rather than face further losses. The Council of the Zoroth laughed at the weakness of humans. In their arrogance, they ignored the old warnings recorded in their own history. Long ago, the Zoroth had faced humans at the height of the Dragon Wars. Those records still existed, buried deep in their archives. Warnings spoke of humans who fought like storms, who never gave up even when outnumbered, who rose from ashes stronger than before. But the new leaders of the Zoroth had forgotten these lessons. They believed those stories were only exaggerations written by fearful ancestors. That mistake would cost them everything. On the colonies still free, small groups of survivors began to prepare for resistance. They sent signals to each other, trying to stay hidden from the Zoroth patrols. Hope returned to their hearts when they heard rumors. A whisper passed from one survivor to another, "The dragons are coming." In one such colony, a young boy asked his mother, "What are dragons?" She smiled sadly, brushing dirt from his face. "They are humans, like us, but stronger in spirit. They fight when no one else can. And if the stories are true, they are waking up." The boy's eyes widened. He had only ever heard dragons in bedtime tales, but now those tales felt real. He hugged his mother tightly, feeling safe for the first time since the invasion began. Back on Riston, Darren sealed the chamber. He had made his choice. He would not remain silent while colonies burned. The dragons had been forgotten, but they were not gone. The time of peace had ended, and the time of fire was beginning. The message from Arlen had reached its mark. Across the galaxy, the dragons stirred. The Zoroth thought they had conquered a weak people. In truth, they had only awakened the storm. The stars had grown restless. Across human space, signals traveled faster than light, carrying a single truth: war had returned. On peaceful planets, people whispered of fire. On silent outposts, alarms flickered to life. And in forgotten hangars, machines that had slept for decades stirred once again. The dragons were gathering. Darren stood on the surface of Riston, watching a transport ship rise into the sky. He had called 3 old comrades, and each had answered without hesitation. They arrived one by one, carrying nothing but determination and memories. The first was Myra, the pilot who had never lost a race across the stars. She stepped out of her fighter with her helmet under her arm, her eyes calm and sharp. The second was Kale, once a ground commander, broad-shouldered and scarred, who had led troops through the fiercest wars. The third was Ren, a quiet strategist who spoke little but saw everything. Together, they stood before Darren in silence, and no words were needed. They were dragons, and the fire in their hearts had not gone out. In the bunker, they gathered around a glowing table that showed maps of the colonies. Red marks spread across the screen, each representing a Zoroth stronghold. The sight was heavy, but none of them looked away. "The Zoroth think they have already won," Ren said softly. "They believe we are scattered and weak. That is their mistake." "They are too many," Kale replied, his voice deep. "But numbers never frightened us before." Myra traced a line across the map with her finger. "They hold Arlen, but their patrol routes are lazy. They do not expect resistance. If we strike the right place, We can break their control and show the colonies that they are not alone. Darren listened, his eyes fixed on the stars. He knew they were only 4, and even if more dragons answered the call, they would still be few compared to the Zoroth fleets. But that was never the strength of humans. Their power was not in numbers. Their power was in spirit, in courage, and in the will to stand when all seemed lost. Far away, in another forgotten base, more dragons answered the call. Old ships were repaired, their engines roaring to life. The sound of metal and fire filled the air as veterans worked side by side, their hands steady despite their age. For them, it was not just war. It was duty. It was a promise to the generations who had come after them. On the colonies, survivors heard the rumors grow stronger each day. In the caves where families hid, in the ruins where fighters resisted, the same words spread like wildfire: the dragons are coming. Fear turned into hope, and despair turned into courage. Farmers sharpened their tools into weapons. Miners built traps in the tunnels beneath the towns. Children whispered about seeing ships in the night sky, wondering if they had seen the first dragons returning. The Zoroth commanders noticed the change but dismissed it. They laughed at the humans' hope, calling it foolish. They continued to patrol lazily, believing no real threat could rise against them. Their arrogance blinded them to the storm forming at the edge of their vision. On Riston, the 4 dragons prepared for their first mission. Darren walked through the hangar where his old war suit stood ready. The armor was heavy, built to endure the deadliest battles, and as he stepped into it, he felt the weight of the past return. Myra's fighter gleamed after hours of repair, its wings sharp and ready to cut through space once again. Kale tested his weapons, his steady hands moving with the confidence of experience. Ren adjusted the maps, marking their path with careful precision. "Do you think the others will come?" Myra asked as they stood together. "They will," Darren said firmly. "The dragons do not forget. They may be scattered, but the fire still burns in every one of them. When they hear what we have done, they will rise." Their plan was simple, but dangerous. They would not strike the heart of the Zoroth fleet yet. Instead, they would attack a supply station hidden near the colony routes. That station fueled the patrols, and if it fell, the Zoroth would feel the first cut. More importantly, it would send a message to every human colony: the dragons had returned. As the night sky of Riston filled with stars, their ships lifted off the ground. The engines roared, shaking the old hangars, and for the first time in years, the dragons flew together. Darren felt the rush of space around him, the endless black filled with points of light. Ahead of him, Myra's fighter cut through the void like a flame. Kale's heavy transport followed close, carrying weapons and supplies. Ren's ship stayed near the back, its sensors sweeping every corner. They were only 4 against an empire, but they carried something stronger than numbers. They carried the spirit of humanity, the same spirit that had survived every storm before. On the colony of Arlen, the Zoroth soldiers celebrated their victory in the streets they had stolen. Fires burned in barrels, alien voices filled the air with songs of conquest, and human survivors hid in silence. None of them knew that in the dark sky above, the storm had already begun to gather. The dragons had awakened. Their wings of fire spread once more across the stars, and every step they took brought them closer to the heart of the enemy. The galaxy did not yet know it, but history was about to repeat itself. Humanity was rising again, and the Zoroth would soon learn that their greatest mistake was believing humans were weak. The storm was coming, and the dragons were leading it. The Zoroth supply station floated quietly in the void. It was large, built with thick walls of metal, and guarded by a ring of patrol ships. From a distance, it looked calm, like a silent fortress. Inside, the aliens worked without worry. They had no reason to fear. To them, the humans were already defeated. But the dragons were coming. Darren sat in the command chair of his ship, his eyes fixed on the glowing display before him. The station appeared as a cluster of bright lights on the screen, its patrols moving in lazy circles. He could feel the tension in the air, but his voice was calm. "Myra, you take the lead," he said. Her voice came back through the channel, clear and sharp. "Understood. Keep close, and watch my signal." Kale prepared the heavy weapons on his transport. He muttered, not in fear, but in determination. "Let us remind them who we are." Ren's voice was steady as always. "Patrol routes are weak on the far side of the station. They do not expect an attack there. We strike from that angle, fast and clean." The dragons moved into position. Their ship slipped through the dark, hidden by the vastness of space. The Zorth patrols scanned for danger, but they did not look closely enough. To them, the void was empty. To the dragons, it was the perfect cover. When the moment came, Myra gave the signal. Her fighter shot forward like a streak of fire, its engines blazing. She fired the first volley, and a Zorth patrol ship exploded in a flash of light. The silence of space was broken. Alarms echoed across the station. Zorth voices shouted in confusion. Patrol ships turned, trying to form a defense, but the dragons were already inside their lines. Kale's transport unleashed heavy fire, tearing through two enemy ships in seconds. Ren guided the formation, calling out targets with precision. Darren's war suit connected to his ship's systems, allowing him to strike with deadly accuracy. The battle was fast and sharp. Myra weaved through enemy fire, her fighter moving with impossible speed. "One down," she called as another Zorth patrol broke apart behind her. Kale covered her flank, his heavy cannons blasting through enemy shields. Ren's calm voice guided them through the chaos. "Left side clear. Focus on the station's power core." Inside the station, panic grew. The Zorth had not expected resistance, let alone an attack so well planned. Their commanders shouted orders, but their forces were already crumbling. They had grown too used to easy victories. They had forgotten what it meant to face humans who refused to bow. The dragons pressed forward. Darren's ship targeted the station's shield generators. "Now," he ordered. His missiles struck, and the shields flickered before collapsing. The station lay open, vulnerable. "Kale, your turn," Ren said. Kale's cannons roared. Fire rained down on the station, tearing through its walls. Explosions lit the darkness of space. Air and fire poured into the void, and the once proud fortress began to break apart. But the Zorth did not give up easily. Reinforcements rushed from the far side of the station, more patrols firing in desperation. The dragons faced heavy fire. Myra's fighter shook as shots grazed her wings. "I can handle it," she said, her voice steady. She turned sharply, drawing 3 patrol ships away from the others. With skill and speed, she looped around them, firing in a deadly arc. All 3 enemy ships fell in flames. Darren's ship took hits too, the shields flashing with each strike. He gritted his teeth, holding the line. "Stay focused. We finish this." Ren found the weak point. His scanners lit up with a bright mark on the station. The fuel core. Hit it, and the entire station falls. Darren locked onto the target. With careful aim, he fired. His missiles struck true, and a great explosion tore through the center of the station. Flames and debris shot out in every direction. The supply station was no more. Silence returned to the void, broken only by the crackle of damaged ships. The dragons had done what no one thought possible. They had struck the Zoroth and won. On the colonies, the news spread faster than light. Survivors heard the words with tears in their eyes. The dragons have returned. They destroyed a Zoroth station. Hope filled their voices. People who had hidden in fear now stepped into the light, believing that freedom was possible. The Zoroth Council, far away in their empire's heart, received the reports. At first, they laughed, calling it an accident. But when details arrived, their laughter faded. Only 4 human ships had struck down a fortress guarded by dozens. Only 4 had done what entire fleets could not. Fear began to stir in the council chambers. The dragons regrouped, their ships scarred but still strong. Myra's fighter had burns along its wings, Kale's transport had cracks in its armor, and Darren's ship bore heavy marks from the battle. But they had survived, and more importantly, they had won. Ren looked at the map again, his calm eyes shining with quiet fire. This is only the beginning. They will come for us now. But every human world will know we are here. The storm has begun. Darren nodded, his voice steady. Then let them come. We are dragons. And the galaxy will remember why they feared us. The first strike had been made. The fire had been lit. And across the stars, the storm grew stronger. The ruins of the Zoroth supply station drifted silently through space. Broken pieces of metal floated in the void, glowing with the last sparks of fire. For the Zoroth, it was a mark of shame. For humanity, it was a sign of hope. Across the colonies, whispers turned into cheers. Farmers spoke of the dragons around fire pits. Miners raised their hands and shouted the name with pride. In hidden shelters, children asked their parents to tell them stories of the old wars again. The survivors believed what they once thought impossible. Humanity was fighting back. The news spread beyond the colonies, carried by traders and coded signals. On every human world, people repeated the same words, the dragons have returned. But for the Zoroth, the news spread like poison. In their council chambers, the High Lords argued. They were seated in a wide hall of shining stone, their voices echoing against the walls. Some were furious, demanding more fleets be sent to crush the humans. Others were uneasy, their voices trembling as they spoke of history. We cannot ignore this, one commander said. 4 ships destroyed an entire station. This is not chance. This is not luck. This is something else. Another scoffed. Do not speak of old legends. Those stories are lies, written by weak leaders who lost their nerve. Humans are farmers and miners. They are not warriors. But the room grew quiet when the oldest counselor spoke. His voice was rough, filled with age and memory. You are wrong. I was a child during the last war against humans. I remember the stories told by my father. The dragons were real. They burned fleets, destroyed armies, and forced empires to their knees. If they have returned, we must tread carefully. The younger lords did not want to listen, but fear had already taken root. For the first time, the Zoroth Empire felt doubt. Meanwhile, in the colonies, resistance groups grew bolder. With every rumor of dragon victories, more people stood against the invaders. On one colony, farmers set fire to Zoroth supplies in the night. On another, miners collapsed tunnels to trap patrols. Small victories lit the hearts of the survivors, and each time, the Zoroth found themselves facing more than they had expected. The dragons themselves knew their victory was only the beginning. In the hangar of their hidden base, Darren looked at the others as they repaired their ships. Myra's fighter had new armor plates. Kale's transport carried stronger cannons. Ren worked on the sensors, scanning deeper into Zoroth space. "They will come for us now," Darren said. "The Council will not ignore what we have done." Myra smirked slightly. "Good. Let them come. The more they chase us, the more mistakes they make." Kale placed his hand on the heavy weapon mounted to his ship. "They think fear will weaken us. They do not understand. Fear only makes us stronger." Ren nodded, his calm voice steady. "And the colonies are watching. Each strike we make gives them courage. That is our true weapon." The dragons knew they were still too few to fight an empire head-on. Their strength lay in striking fast, then vanishing before the enemy could react. They moved like shadows through the stars, attacking supply lines, raiding patrols, and leaving destruction behind. Each time they struck, more humans whispered their name. Soon, even alien traders outside the Zoroth Empire began to speak of the dragons. They carried the stories from one system to another. Some told them with fear, others with admiration, but the effect was the same. The legend of the dragons spread once more across the galaxy. The Zoroth soldiers on the colonies felt this fear most of all. At night, they whispered to each other about human shadows moving through the dark. They spoke of ships that appeared out of nowhere, striking like fire, then vanishing before help arrived. Many began to doubt their victory. Some even refused to patrol the outer routes. One commander tried to silence his troops. He shouted at them, calling them weak. But when his patrol vanished into the black of space and never returned, his voice was no longer heard. On Arlen, the first colony taken by the Zoroth, survivors heard the news too. They were still under heavy guard, but their spirits rose. Children carved the shape of wings into the dirt, calling them dragon wings. Adults passed secret messages between houses, reminding each other to be strong. Even under chains, the people of Arlen began to believe freedom would return. The Zoroth Empire could not hide the truth. Their reports grew darker with each passing day. Fleets were stretched thin. Supplies ran low. And the fear of the dragons spread faster than fire. In their hidden base, the dragons gathered once more. Ren displayed the latest maps, showing enemy movements. "They are pulling ships from other borders. They fear us so much they are leaving their own flanks weak." Myra smiled as she studied the maps. "Then the time is coming. We will strike harder." Darren's voice was firm. "Yes. But we must remember why we fight. This is not only for us. It is for every human child hiding in fear. It is for every colony waiting for hope. We are not just soldiers. We are dragons, and we carry the spirit of all humanity." The others nodded. Their faces were scarred, their ships damaged, their numbers few. Yet they carried something stronger than any empire belief. The Zoroth thought they had conquered a broken people. Instead, they had awakened a storm. And now, that storm was spreading across every corner of the galaxy. The dragons had returned, and fear followed their wings. The first colony to rise again was not the largest, nor the strongest. It was a small farming world called Nira, where green fields stretched to the horizon and rivers once ran clear. The Zoroth had taken it quickly, forcing families to work under guard and sending its food supplies to their fleets. The people lived in silence, hiding their anger. but when whispers reached them that the dragons had returned, their silence began to crack. The dragons chose Nira as their first liberation. Darren stood in the command room of their base, the map of Nira glowing before him. Red marks showed Zoroth garrisons spread across the colony. Blue dots marked hidden human shelters, where survivors had waited in fear. "We start here," Darren said firmly. "The people are ready. If we free them, the other colonies will see that the Zoroth can be pushed back." Myro leaned on the table, studying the map. "Their defenses are thin. They believe Nira is safe. We strike fast, hit their command post, and the rest will fall." Kale's voice rumbled with determination. "I will take the ground forces. Give me 10 men from the shelters, and I will break their lines." Ren nodded, his calm eyes scanning the display. "The key is the communications tower. If we destroy it, they cannot call for help. The Empire will not know until it is too late." The plan was set. The dragons prepared their ships, and as night fell on Nira, they descended. The people of Nira watched the sky in silence as fire streaked across the stars. Children pointed with wide eyes. Elders whispered old prayers. And when the first explosions lit the night, the people knew the dragons had come. Myro led the air strike. Her fighters soared low, weaving between the hills and farms. She unleashed her weapons on the Zoroth patrols, tearing through their vehicles before they could react. Explosions shook the ground, and alien soldiers scrambled in confusion. Kale landed with a group of farmers and miners who had taken up arms. They were not trained soldiers, but they carried the courage of people defending their home. Kale raised his weapon high. "For Nira," he shouted. The cry was answered by dozens of voices, and together they charged. The battle was fierce. Zoroth soldiers fired from their posts, but Kale's heavy steps crushed their lines. The farmers struck with tools and blades, pushing forward with a fire the invaders had never expected. For every man who fell, 2 more rose. At the same time, Ren guided a small team toward the communications tower. His voice was steady, his plan precise. They moved in silence, slipping past enemy patrols. When they reached the tower, Ren placed charges along its base. He spoke calmly into his comms. "Charges set. Clear the area." Moments later, the tower fell in a burst of fire, its signal silenced forever. Darren fought in the skies, his ship blasting enemy transports trying to escape. His voice filled the channels with strength. "Hold the line. Nira will be free." The turning point came when Myra destroyed the Zoroth command post. A single, sharp strike from above reduced it to burning ruins. Without orders, the alien soldiers panicked. Some fled into the hills, others threw down their weapons. The battle was over. As dawn broke over Nira, the people emerged from their shelters. They walked into the open fields, staring at the dragons who stood among them. Kale removed his helmet, his scarred face revealed to the crowd. The farmers who had fought by his side looked at him with awe. Myro landed her fighter near a river. Children gathered around it, touching its wings with wonder. She stepped out, smiling softly as they called her name. Ren stood near the ruins of the tower, watching the horizon. He said little, but his presence was enough. The people knew they were safe. And Darren, the oldest of them, stood before the crowd in the center of the colony. His voice carried across the fields. "Nira is free. Humanity is not broken. This world belongs to you again. And as long as the dragons stand, no one will take it from you." The people cheered, their voices rising like thunder. For the first time in years, Nero was alive with hope. News of the victory traveled across the stars. Other colonies heard and believed. On Arlen, survivors whispered with joy. On Terran, miners lifted their tools like weapons once more. The Zoroth had taken many worlds, but now they were losing them. In the Zoroth Council, fear grew deeper. Reports arrived of a colony lost, of soldiers defeated by humans armed with nothing but courage and old weapons. Some commanders demanded more fleets be sent. Others warned that spreading forces too thin would invite disaster. The council was divided, and their fear grew. For the dragons, Nero was only the beginning. In their base, they gathered once more. Ren updated the maps, showing new targets. Myra smiled, her eyes filled with fire. Kale sharpened his blade, ready for the next fight. Darren looked at them all, his voice steady. We will not stop. Every colony they took, we will return. Every world they burned, we will rebuild. The Zoroth thought humanity was weak. But we are dragons, and we rise from the ashes stronger than before. The liberation of Nero was more than a victory. It was a promise. A promise that the colonies would return, one by one, until humanity was free. The liberation of Nero spread across human space like fire across dry fields. Every colony that still lived in fear now lifted its head with courage. The dragons had proven the Zoroth could be defeated, and with each passing day, more humans rose to fight. Farmers became soldiers, miners became defenders, and children grew up whispering the name of the dragons as a promise of safety. But the Zoroth Empire could not accept such humiliation. They had lost a station, patrols, and now a colony. Their pride was wounded, and their leaders demanded revenge. The council gathered in their great hall, their voices sharp with anger. They cannot be allowed to spread, one commander declared. If more colonies rise, the humans will become a fire that even we cannot put out. Another shouted, then we crush them now. Send everything. Every ship, every soldier. And this before it grows beyond control. The oldest counselor spoke again, his voice heavy with memory. We warned you. The dragons are not myths. They are real, and they will not break. If we send everything we have and still fail, the empire will never recover. But the younger lords were too proud to listen. Orders were given. The largest fleet the Zoroth had ever gathered moved toward the colonies, their ships darkening the stars. It was meant to be the final strike, the blow that would erase humanity from the edges of space forever. The dragons knew the storm was coming. In their base, Ren studied the maps with sharp eyes. His calm voice broke the silence. They are sending everything. Not just patrols or garrisons. Their entire fleet moves toward us. Myra leaned against the table, her arms crossed. So this is it? The final fight? Kale grinned, though his eyes were fierce. Good. I was growing tired of chasing scraps. Let us meet them head on. Darren stood silent for a long moment, then finally spoke. His voice was steady, filled with the weight of all their battles. This is what we were born for. They believe fear will make us run. They do not understand. We are dragons. We do not run. The colonies prepared as best they could. Civilians were moved into shelters. Fighters hidden for decades were brought out and armed. Resistance groups joined with the dragons, ready to fight at their side. The humans were fewer, weaker in ships and weapons, but their hearts burned brighter than the stars. When the Zoroth fleet arrived, the sky above the colonies turned black with warships. Thousands of enemy cannons pointed down, their shadows stretching across the land. The sight would have broken the spirit of any other people. But for humans, it only made their voices louder. Across the colony of Nira, across the hidden shelters of Arlen, across every world still holding on, the same words echoed, "Stand. The dragons are with us." The battle began with fire. Myra's fighter streaked through the void, weaving between enemy ships. Her voice rang through the comms. "Stay on me. Break their lines." Kale's heavy transport unleashed a storm of fire, blasting through Zarath cruisers. Human resistance fighters in smaller ships followed, striking hard and fast before pulling away. Ren's calm voice guided them, marking weak points and directing every strike. Darren stood at the front, his ship carrying the old symbol of the burning wing. He spoke to every human channel, his voice strong and unshaken. "They believe this is our end. Prove them wrong. Show them who we are. For every colony, for every child, for humanity fight." The battle was chaos. Zarath ships surrounded the colonies, their weapons blazing. Yet the dragons struck like storms. Myra destroyed ship after ship with impossible speed. Kale shielded the smaller fighters, taking hits that would have ended lesser vessels. Ren's strategies turned traps into victories, guiding the resistance through impossible odds. And Darren, the oldest of them, fought with the strength of memory, reminding the galaxy why the dragons had once been feared. Hours passed, and the sky burned. The Zarath fleet, though vast, began to crumble. Their commanders shouted orders, but their soldiers wavered. They had been told humans were weak. Now they saw humans fighting with fire in their eyes, refusing to fall even when outnumbered. Fear spread through their ranks like a shadow. At last, the dragons found their chance. Ren marked the flagship of the Zarath fleet. "That is their command. End it, and the battle ends." The dragons focused their fire. Myra darted between enemy cannons, striking the flagship's engines. Kale's cannons tore through its shields. Darren's missiles found the heart of its power core. With a final burst of fire, the flagship exploded, its light filling the dark sky. The Zarath fleet broke. Some ships fled, others surrendered, and the rest fell in silence. The greatest force the Empire had gathered was gone. Humanity stood, bloodied but unbroken. After the battle, the colonies gathered in celebration. Survivors filled the streets, voices rising in songs of hope. Children painted wings on walls. Farmers and miners raised banners with the mark of the dragons. Humanity was free again, not because of numbers or weapons, but because of spirit. The dragons sent one final message, carried across the stars in every direction. Darren's voice spoke for them all. "To the Zarath Empire, hear these words. You attacked human colonies. You thought we were weak. But you were wrong. You have awakened the dragons. We will not bow. We will not break. And if you ever come again, you will face our fire." The message spread across the galaxy. To humans, it was a promise of protection. To the Zarath, it was a warning carved in fire. To other races, it was a reminder that humanity still stood strong. The war was not over, but the tide had turned. Humanity had shown once more why it had survived every storm. The dragons had risen, and the galaxy would never forget.